Thank you, Ben. So part one is the numbers. So in order to understand the scale of the challenge, the quantities of retrofit measures delivered needs to be explored through these questions. So we looked at what the targets were, what is the rate of delivery, what is the average spend per tenure, and is delivery consistent across tenures? So I'm going to hand over to Tara, and Tara will take you from here. Tara, if you just want to say next slide, please, I can do that for you.
Brilliant, thanks, Sarah. So yeah, so just to introduce this analysis, so what we did is we analysed EPC ratings and used the sixth carbon budget target of EPCC by 2035 in this analysis. We tried to be as granular as possible. So for example, we used condition reports for each country, and this was the idea of that was to build a picture for each country. So the bar chart on the left, we see the proportion of homes requiring retrofit. We can see that it varies between about 50 to 70% of each country. But what's important to look at as well as this is the actual number of homes that require retrofit as well. So the proportions are similar, but the numbers are vastly different. So what we see is in England, we need 11.8 million homes require retrofit. So if we go on to the next slide, what we've done, as Sarah introduced, is that we dived a bit deeper into England because of the information that was available to us at the time of this analysis. So the purpose of this chart is to demonstrate the ramp up that's required. So we go from 250,000 homes being retrofit today, and this is the ramp up required if we were to reach 11.8 million by 2035. So this is by no means a delivery profile, which would have it's kind of this perfect steps, but it does demonstrate the scale of the challenge in terms of orders of magnitude. What we try to do as well on this is break down the delivery rates as well per tenure, because of course everyone needs to be brought along this retrofit journey. Before we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to focus your attention on the 2022 bar chart and the distribution we have between private homes, social housing, and rented from private landlords. So this is the tenure grouping that has been delivered today. And if we go on to the next slide, what we'll see is that 2022 delivery is shown on the left, and we see that the homes that are being retrofitted today broadly follow the tenure split that exists in England. However, what we found is when you break down those delivery rates against the spend per home, a very bit different picture emerges. And what we're finding that this financial sum associated with the retrofit delivery per home suggests a very different energy performance uplift is being applied to each tenure group. So for example, when we look at the private rented sector, the average spend per home is £2,600. So the data for this is difficult to access, but we've interpreted that the interventions applied within this tenure group are very different to, say, social housing. So, we need to improve the data quality and the data access for the private rented sector, and equally, more extensive kind of performance uplift needs to be applied as well. When we look at social housing, we see a very different spend per home, and then again for the owner occupier, we see an 8,500. So if we go to the next slide, and the final slide for the numbers, so we've looked forward at what needs to be delivered, but then equally we want to compare it back to what has been delivered. So again, we see that 11.8 million homes are below EPCC. This is in England. We see over the last 10 years that 2.17 million retrofit measures have been delivered. Of that, 2.1 million of them have been delivered through ECO, and that we see that of the 2.1 million measures delivered by ECO, 700,000 of them have been boiler replacements. So not only does the future look, we've got a big step change required, but equally it's quite different to what's been done in the past. And I'll pass back over to Sarah.
Thanks, Tara. So I think it's important with those numbers to also understand, and when you receive the slide deck, everybody in this meeting will receive that. There are hyperlinks to the sources of all of that data and the way that they've been analysed. There are pages and pages and pages of Excel spreadsheets behind some of this. So we're happy to have conversations around the data sources and what else it can tell us. But really what we're trying to do is move us forward into what it is that we should be focusing on next. So Donald's going to take you now through our models approach. So what were the models? What was the customer/resident journey? What was the analysis approach? And what were the findings? So I'm going to pass over to you now, Donald.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Please click to the next slide. So yeah, to deliver this work, we convened a number of task and finish groups over the course of sort of last year and coming into the spring of this year, to sort of divide up the challenge and understand how different models and segments are approaching retrofit delivery, and kind of the qualitative insights we can draw about how those different schemes and programs are going. So obviously you can imagine that's quite a lot of detail, because we have multiple grant funded schemes in the owner occupied segment alone, and we also have multiple nations of the United Kingdom to look at. So there's a lot of different data points and workshops we ran to deliver that. But broadly, those task and finish groups were looking at that grant funded owner occupier piece, the public funded social housing, so your SHDF, your schemes in Wales and Scotland.
Donald, we've lost your sound, I think. You appear to be muted.
Sorry, I'm having real audio trouble today. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yeah.
You hear me?
Go again.
Hi.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. You might want to turn off your video so we can get the benefit of what you've got to say on this. Yeah.
Okay. So where was I? So yeah, we also looked at sort of the private finance owner occupier space, your sort of RMI funded retrofit. So that's everything from a DIY retrofit right up to a sort of NFIT standard architect-led retrofit. We also examined the emerging phenomena of retrofit one-stop shops, which are beginning to pop up in different locations around the country, usually with some kind of place-based coverage. And an even more nascent example around what we're calling place-based integrated delivery, where we're trying to do multiple things, maybe not only retrofit in the renovation of neighbourhoods. So that phase is sort of ongoing, but we are also now launching a new task and finish group, which we are in the process of requesting case studies on, which is international best practice. So we're really keen to hear from all of you to pass on case studies to the National Retrofit Hub of where retrofit is being delivered. It's Europe and beyond, I think, isn't it? Or mainly Europe we're interested in.
Yeah, it's that and beyond.
We've learn what we can from.
We've had some things come in from Canada and that as well.
Do things faster and more efficiently than us. Are you hearing me okay? Just because I've had to change my audio format. I have to take my headphones off. Next slide, please. Top's having an absolute wobble. Next slide, please.
It's there.
Yeah, it's just a bit more detail on this. You can see for each of these different working groups, we had a slightly different methodology. You can see all of the different examples we looked at, a combination of desk-based research and workshops, as well as standing on some great existing work already done, for example, by the UK Green Building Council and MCS Foundation, who fortuitously had just completed a research project mapping one-stop shops or retrofit facilitation service providers across England, Wales and Scotland. So, you know, we've drawn a real rich evidence base to pull together some of these insights. Next slide, please. So our sort of framework for doing this, and if you talked to me recently, you'll have seen this diagram in various forms because it's structuring a lot of the work I'm doing at the moment, is to sort of understand the different stages of the customer journey. And that helps us understand how things are being done and the quality to which, or the, you know, whether things are working well or not at different stages. So that starts with the idea of the entry or trigger points, or what causes a household to think about doing a retrofit, what their motivations are, the nature of the advice they receive, who provides it in the format in which that's provided, is it formal or informal, how the actual detailed specification is developed and what measures are chosen, how that process works, how we find contractors, everything from, you know, your informal relationship with your mate down the pub right through to kind of full local government procurement frameworks and everything in between. Each has a bearing on how this market operates. How we pay for that, the different funding mechanisms that exist to pay for retrofit, and then the actual installation, the handover process itself. So how does that process play out? And kind of undergirding all of this, in theory, should be quality assurance, which happens at every stage in the project life cycle, although that is true in some areas and less true in others. But this is the sort of broad framework that we've been using. Next slide, please. So during our workshops and during our sort of research, we've asked really three major questions of these different programs in our different task and finish groups. The first is what the challenges are being faced at each stage in the customer journey. A lot of negative feedback, and we struggle sometimes to be positive, but we have focused on some positive stuff too. How the policy environment or other factors is helping or hindering this phase of the journey, and then trying to find examples of best practice. We think actually that piece, we will carry on doing that and draw in some kind of best practice case studies and keep going with, and sort of think slightly differently about how we might present best practice, given that we've already got loads of detail in this report already, and maybe we can showcase good practice slightly separately from what is already quite a long document. Next slide, please. So yeah, you can just see the summary of the workshops we ran. Many of you were in attendance of those. Lots of post-its, lots of discussion, lots of detail across all of these schemes. So we're really trying not to miss anything in terms of what is being delivered, certainly in the grant-funded programs that exist in the UK at the moment or have done in the recent years. So yeah, that's just a summary of that. Next slide. So yeah, what I'll just briefly do now is just give you a quick summary of some of the key findings. There's a lot of detail in here, so I'll just pick out a few sort of example things we found, but I think we really welcome you to feedback on this report and kind of sense check it, check our homework as we share it with you, I think, in the very near future. So I'll just skip through these now. So the first area is around grant-funded owner-occupier. So this is everything from Eco to LAD to Hug to the Nest and Arbed schemes in Wales. So just to pull some things out, you know, we often find quite complex eligibility requirements, challenges in verification, difficulties in engaging the public, the fact that audits often weren't very comprehensive and left surprises on sites. We didn't understand the stock very well before we start. Lack of good advice being quite pervasive across the piece, so people don't know where to get good advice on which grants they're eligible for and what measures might be suitable for their home. There's often then, you know, linked to the eligibility, quite restrictive grant funding rules about what you can and cannot fund, who cannot be funded. Obviously, pervasive skills shortage, and often just not enough funding, obviously, to tackle things like fuel poverty in a holistic way. Obviously, we've seen in recent years things like PAS come in for Eco, which has, you know, increased our quality assurance frameworks, but there still remains lots of substandard work. Next slide, please. So I think it's fair to say many of the same issues being faced in social housing, but obviously with the case of things like SHDF, there is a competitive nature to the funding allocation. So often that means that those with most capacity win funding rather than those in most need. And that's very heavy on the admin front for housing associations and landlords to secure funding. Engagement, again, a big challenge. Again, limited understanding of the stock being really pervasive across both of these markets. We've seen with things like SHDF, particularly things like solid wall insulation deeper measures being dropped through the process because they prove to be more expensive or difficult. And obviously the problem around pepper potting with right to buy and, you know, different tenure types occurring on the same street. Big challenges around short grant delivery cycles. I think that was true across almost all examples, you know, funding running out in a very limited time frame, creating kind of compression in the supply chain, boom and bust, etc., etc. So yeah, a lack of measurement of outcomes, also a big issue. Slide, please. Hopefully I'm not going too slowly. with these. I can speed up a little bit if you like. So the RMI space is interesting because obviously this market is very, very large. The wider RMI market is about 25 billion a year in the UK. It dwarfs the actual retrofit market itself. So that's a real, in our view, huge missed opportunity for retrofit to happen when we're already got scaffolding up, when we're already going into people's homes. But there is some activity happening. It's actually very difficult to track how much is going on, because this can be anything from people buying bats of insulation to their local B&Q, or having to do other measures, when they're doing their kitchen. So that just lack of data has really been a challenge for us in understanding what retrofit is occurring in that space. But generally there is a lack of trust and kind of low awareness of the options when people are doing broader renovation work. Lack of advice probably even more pervasive here, because it's not really even set up to support people in that way. Lack of quality kind of design, and many of the checks and balances that do exist for the grant funded market do not exist in this sort of more unregulated space. So there's often a preoccupation with house values as overshadowing the value of retrofit measures, and trying to bring in the value of retrofit into when people are thinking about renovating. Or we are starting to see that in house price valuations and work that's being done in that space. Just a lot of reticence from the supply chain, lack of knowledge and skills, probably most pervasive here, because many of them have no experience and knowledge of retrofit whatsoever. A lack of good finance products. There are obviously a lot of green mortgages out there in the market. I think there's about 30 products, but they are not really being taken up at any significant scale as it stands. So sort of a lack of those lending products actually making their way through into people doing projects. And obviously PAS system exists, but it tends to not be used for these private projects. So, there's potentially even more risk of unintended consequences and bad outcomes without that kind of overall quality framework and presiding over it. That's I think it's the last one. The one-stop shop space, obviously an emerging space. We've heard this term thrown around a lot for years, but we are now seeing various services emerging in the UK. Retrofit Works, Furb now, PeoplePad Retrofit, a whole host of different offerings around the country. Obviously, this is still a very small market, probably the smallest of all of the ones we looked at. And many of the same challenges around a lack of kind of skills and knowledge and quality advice. Although obviously one-stop shops are in theory there to help resolve a lot of that. And the sort of challenges that exist with working with that existing system, finding installers, getting insurance products, a supply chain which is older and doesn't necessarily want to join in these new initiatives. Few providers often offering funded work, so you often can't really pay for these additional quality and kind of management services through the existing grant programs. So it's quite hard to get people who are eligible to be funded through things like a one-stop shop. Most are not offering finance because of the complexities associated with that, or few are. Similar issues, but in theory, this market is there to begin to pull together and solve many of them that we've mentioned. So I think it's an interesting area of development and needs greater support through policy, I think, to have more of these and have one-stop shops or retrofit providers in every location. Okay, I think that is all I will waffle on about. But yeah, if you're really interested in the findings, the report that we'll publish will have a lot more detail, and you can obviously interrogate some of our assumptions and some of the work that's gone into that. But thanks, and I'll pass back to Sarah.
Thanks, Donald. Yeah, it's really great. And I appreciate the brevity in which you went through that, because that's a summary of top level things that sit across a huge wealth of information gathered through interacting with our network. So thanks so much. What you see now on screen is a table where we further distilled the summary points. So if we had these huge Miro boards of qualitative feedback as well as the quantitative data analysis that Tara helped us with, we obviously did sort of a summary of what was coming up most, what were the things that were rising to the surface, and we gathered those challenge themes. Well, we gathered those challenges and policy constraints, I suppose, into challenge thematic areas, and we cross-referenced them with what other working group activity is already happening in National Retrofit Hub. We tried to just do that bit of analysis on what was coming up, with the intention really to move past the conversation of, as you mentioned, Donal, like, yes, we are all talking about the barriers, and everybody on this call will be tired of talking about the barriers to retrofit. So what we wanted to do was do that deep dive analysis so that we could draw a line and move forward with activity that would see us start to unlock some of those barriers as a collective effort. So what we've highlighted on this is that not only are the 4 things that we have identified, we looked at how many times these things were arising as an issue. So you'll see the occurrences box, this sort of light green heading here, occurrences, of how many times things arose. And so public engagement, I recognize the text is small here, but you're going to get to see it on a bigger screen in a moment. There were 4 areas that, through the analysis of what's going on in the other working groups, as well as how many times this arose as an issue and whether or not anybody was actually addressing some of these issues, is what brought us to picking 4 thematic areas. So I'm just going to take us from this slide into the next phase of today's meeting, which is into our breakout sessions. So, oh, and as Donal mentioned, there's a lot in the appendices that you can see. There's huge amounts of information that will sit within this report. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment while I get my Miro board open, and then we are going to drop, we will explain what's going to happen next. We'll explain the next steps. So I have a Miro board and I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, here we go. So we have this Miro board, which you will be taken through in breakout sessions, and we will share the link to the Miro board in a moment. We'll just hold off on sharing that for a sec. So the table that I showed you, I'm going to zoom right in here. The table that I showed you was here. So as I said, of all of those summary slides that Donal had just taken you through, we went through and tried to thematically group the challenges and then work out how many times those things arose and how we would categorize those problems and what other working group activity was happening. So we have pulled out 4 that we feel are areas that we as a group would like to focus on. So they are public engagement, and that means advice, demand and policy, outcomes and evaluations. So outcome, we'll come to this over here. We've got measuring outcomes and impact evaluation. We picked out competitive grant structure, funding and administration, and mentioned public engagement. And the last one is planning policy. So we have 4 areas, and what the intention here is, I will take one as an example. So in breakout room 1, which you can choose to join once we've opened them, Donal will be your facilitator, and this breakout room will be looking at public engagement. Now, this format is a format that any of you who are involved with Working Group 3 will be familiar with. It's essentially a way that we can put down what our objective would be in order to meet and come up against whatever the issue is. How do we resolve this issue? And so a statement around public engagement might be that systems of effective and inclusive engagement exist and available via a centralized source of trusted information. So that is standing in the future. That is what we want to see happening as one objective for improving public engagement around retrofit. Now, what we then have is a space for you to use sticky notes to put in what gaps you think exist, what good stuff is happening already or is planned in the pipeline, who can help, and what the role of the National Retrofit Hub ought to be in this space. Also down here, we've got little bubbles that say other working group activity within the hub that might be going on. Now, in this example, we don't really need you to thrash out the gaps as much as we want you to focus on either what's already happening or who can help and what our role ought to be moving forward. What I've just dropped in here is the reason that we don't really want you to focus too much on the gaps here is because we've spent a lot of time focusing on the gaps. And so we don't want to go over old ground. You can have a look in these Miro board links. We've shared them with you in the main report. You can go in and see if there's any glaring omissions, and we welcome you to do that in your own time if you'd like. So really for this particular statement, we want to focus on you know, what good stuff is already planned, who can help, is that you, are there organizations that you think we should be speaking with, and then what you feel the role of the National Retrofit Hub is. And with that in mind, whatever the role of the National Retrofit Hub is, these will become the activities of the hub, and that means of the working groups, and hopefully with your help and your support to create these outputs that we have been in the process of creating. So we will do the same. What I would say is that some of these, because there's a lot of work has taken us to get to this point, some of these statements are incomplete, or maybe there are several more. So there you will see that there's a couple of templates here about what those objectives might be, just looking at the competitive grant structure and the funding. The objective statement here is that relevant delivery support systems exist for building owners, stock asset managers, delivery organizations for a given delivery model. Now, what we've done here is a first output from the hub on this is that we recently did a call out for local authority retrofit advisory support services, and we will be publishing what we have found so far. We've had about 40 responses from people in our network saying that they provide those services. And so we will hold a directory for local authorities to be able to access existing support services. But what else needs to happen for the other entities that are delivering retrofit? So you can see that's the sort of approach that we've been taking. So I think what I'll do is your facilitators will understand a little bit about like what's going on in these breakout rooms. So we might just move straight to that. I'm going to pause for a minute and ask if Tara or Donal or Rachel Owens have anything they wanted to add or remind me of anything that I have forgotten to mention at this point. All good, all good. Donal? No, he was just, no, great. So in a moment, the breakout rooms will open. Breakout room number 1, to remind you, is all about public engagement. Breakout room number 2 is about competitive grant structures, funding and administration. And what we really mean there is that it's kind of problematic competitive grant structures. So what we've got at the moment. Tara is going to be facilitating the measuring outcomes and impact evaluation working group. And I will facilitate planning policy. So Ben, if you are there, do we have, I tell you what I will do, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we will put a link in the, no, we won't put a link in the chat. What will we do? Here's the Miro board. Thank you very much. So the Miro board is there. If you can't access Miro on your own systems, don't worry, your facilitators will be able to, and we will be following up after this meeting with all of the relevant links and anything else that you want to let us know about. So Ben is busy in the background. I know this is not the easy part, trying to create the breakout rooms. There they are. So what you can do is you can, if you scroll to the bottom, you can join one of the breakout rooms. I'm going to go ahead and join room 4 because I'm facilitating that. And Ben, if you can stay here in the main room and make sure everybody can get assigned, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much. See you very soon, everybody.
Donal, I don't understand how to choose a breakout room.
Neither do I.
So if you click
we were being
the
allocated.
No, so it's assign yourself. So
They've
yeah, the
changed
three.
Zoom completely. It's really.
I know. But yeah, I've been able to access it by clicking the three dots in the bottom bar. There's the more section, and then you can go to breakout rooms there.
I don't see it.
I found the link in the chat, and then
Okay.
gives you all 4 boards, and you can, I think you can just zoom in on whichever one you want.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
I
just
might
in
be
terms
wrong.
of the discussions that are taking place, because there's the 4 breakout rooms to discuss each
Yeah.
individual thing. So
I don't see a
um,
breakout room in the
If you
3
zoom-
dots.
If you zoom right out, I had the same problem. I've just worked it out. I think if you zoom out, you'll see the boards.
There's the breakout rooms button on the bottom. If you click on that, it gives you the option to pick one.
On the bottom.
Where it says chat, share screen, summary, record. There should be a
Yeah.
breakout rooms button.
Oh, I see it. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I
Yeah.
still don't see it.
yeah, sometimes Zoom decides to do this and it just doesn't give you access. So yeah, maybe. So sorry, who said they can't?
Catherine.
Catherine. So which room would you want to join? So there's the
Probably measuring outcomes.
measuring outcomes. Okay, which is 3. So hopefully you'll get dropped in there now.
Thank you. Oh yeah, looks like I am. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Oh, I got thrown back out again.
Okay. Well, it seems like it's probably a functionality issue then. I have no clue why.
It's possible I just pressed a button by accident.
Okay.
Would you better try one more time and then?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Interestingly, so now it won't let me choose room 3 for you, but I'll move you to room 2 and then move you back to room 3, and hopefully that will sort of trigger it to. Okay, we'll give that a go.
Thanks.
Hey, Alistair.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm not too bad, thanks. Probably wondering why there's no one here.
Well, I take it they're all in breakout rooms.
Indeed, they are. Yeah.
Great. What are the
Um,
different breakout rooms about? Or
So there's a link in the chat, which will take you to the Miro boards, where there's 4 sections, and you'll be able to see that, yeah, breakout 1 is about public engagement. Breakout room 2 is about competitive grant structure. 3 is measuring outcomes, and 4 is planning policy.
ooh, I've already chosen just from your brief summary. I'm going to go for room number 2. Right,
Nice
I better.
one.
All right,
All
cheers.
right. Cheers. See ya. Okay, you okay?
Hello, folks. I hope you were enjoying your breakouts as much as we were.
I love seeing the cursors fly across.
Yeah, it's dizzying, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's really great. Actually, we had what I found was, I mean, we can get into some reflections now when everybody's finished zooming around their groups, but it's wonderful to see the kind of cross-pollination of ideas, not only across the specific task and finishes that we're looking at today, but also the other working group activity, and seeing, you know, there's something quite comforting at this stage in the game to see that the problems that are emerging are being looked at in other working groups as well. So that's good. That's progress, right, folks? That's progress. Okay, I think we maybe nearly have everybody back. Can I ask to, I'm just gonna spotlight you as well, Tara, and then whenever I know, and I was looking at my own face in very big picture. I need a friend here. And when Donal arrives back from his work, are you here? Where are you? I can't see you. Ben,
I'm having
spotlighting.
all sorts of tech problems, so
Oh,
can I be seen and heard?
okay. All right.
So both at the same time.
Okay, you can't be seen and heard at the same time, right? You sound like a sort of a secret agent, but that's all right. So I think what we'll do, we're gonna finish up at past, if not before. I imagine that it will be quite difficult to do kind of summaries of what happened in those working groups. But what I would like to ask for is just for the facilitators. So myself, Tara, Rachel, and Donal, if you just wanted to make some observations about what happened, and then what we will do is, for everybody's benefit, you will receive a follow-up email with all the information. So what you've seen today, access links to the Miro, and what's happening next. So we'll come to that. But in order, let's start with you, Donal. Do you have just a couple of minutes on reflecting from your session?
Can you hear me okay?
We can, yeah.
Excellent, because it's been touch and go. People have had volume, not volume. But we've had a really good engaging session. We've got loads of post-its, some really nice ideas and examples, you know, around the idea of public engagement. So I think we kind of discussed the importance of the two levels of this, the need for sort of national engagement, ideally, you know, from central government, where we have an honest conversation with the country, basically, about what needs to happen. We have to transform our housing stock. This is a non-negotiable. So let's do it together, and do it in a way that includes us all and prepares us in good time. So I think there was that, and that's obviously been lacking from government, that mature conversation with the country. And then obviously at the other level, the kind of local engagement piece, which has been happening to more or less degree in different locations. Some really interesting examples coming out of places like Oxford and Bristol. Example from the CSE, where they're targeting kind of different concentrations of different demographic groups in the city of Bristol with different types of messaging. You know, interesting challenges. I'll just pull out Titania's example of the challenges in Oxford that many people, you know, we think
you're breaking up a bit, Donal.
Gas and open fires. He cited that a lot of people.
Ben, do you mind just muting Donal, because I'm not sure he can hear me.
Hello?
Hi, Donal. I'm just gonna.
And so, oh dear.
I'm
sorry. I'll just.
We're just.
Do you want me to give up?
Yeah, if you just mute for a second, you turned into a bit of a dialect there for us, but just as you were getting to some good stuff as well. But I think we will do.
Shall I wrap up?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I won't tell you the chapati story. It was great. But there was a really interesting couple of things for the hub and what it should do. One idea was this kind of idea of a collective communications effort between many of the organisations who are part of this to talk to the country about retrofit. So obviously Ashton, we're comms specialists. many of the others, we all have comms teams. How can we pull together to support the hub to actually talk to everyday people about the retrofit challenge? That was quite a concrete suggestion. The second one maybe being also maybe similarly, relatedly, working with influencers. So people like Martin Lewis, other people who are listened to on these topics. Could we bring somebody like that into a public communications campaign, perhaps offer him a free retrofit where he lives, or free advice or something, so he would do it for not too much money? So that was quite a concrete suggestion. I'll leave it there because I'm all.
That's coming out of your pocket, is it?
Thanks.
Okay, that sounds great. Lots of exciting
Yeah.
things in that would be wonderful. Okay, we'll move to Rachel. I think you were next.
Yeah, so our group was talking about the competitive grant structure, the funding, and the admin that sits behind a lot of these delivery models. And we talked through two different lenses. So the first was, we know that there are issues with the current system. How can we support people to navigate them better? So we talked about better sharing between those who've received funding in the past on like the good, the bad, and the ugly. So like, how do you make sure that you're putting in a bid that's achievable? What have you learned from this? I think part of that is signposting to or creating new learning communities for those types of people. So we know that London councils are starting to do work here, but who else is doing work? Thinking about case studies of people that have successfully navigated these grants. And then there's also a definite role for sort of trying to create more feedback loops between the people that use the schemes and the people that design the schemes. So we talk quite a lot about the idea of, we're very much tied to current Treasury rules around how retrofit can be funded, but there could be potentially a shift away from the more short-term nature of the funding if retrofit was considered to be part of infrastructure. So we talked a little bit about how could we learn from other types of infrastructure. So for example, the healthcare system is a type of infrastructure, and hospitals would be delivered as part of that. So from our perspective, we could link with the local area energy plans and how as infrastructure we're linked to the grid, but also the health system, to help the Treasury see retrofit in a different way, and from that sort of advocate for better shaped funding models. We talked a little bit about whether or not there's a need for convening of the sort of the program writing and the program using sides to create a alternative delivery man, a kind of straw man of like what would a good model look like now. We talked a bit about how net zero neighborhoods is kind of doing this in the Horizon 3 kind of space, thinking about a model that would be ideal but requires a lot of mindset shift to get there. So maybe there's space for a sort of Horizon 2 model that doesn't require such systemic change but could work better in the sort of short to medium term, and whether there's a place for the hub in convening that. And I think also we've talked a bit about tying the programs themselves with the specific outcomes. So making it clear where a program has worked well, has it helped actual measurable outcomes be achieved better, and where they've worked badly, have they meant that the outcomes that are delivered have been less, and then helping to identify what outcomes the scheme should be designing to achieve, so that we make sure that when these schemes get designed, a sort of wide array of outcomes are kind of baked in from the beginning. So yeah, quite a lot of conversation there. I think there were some final points as well about like the people that are missing from the current delivery models, and we talked a bit about whether or not some of the work that Marina Tapuzzi is doing at UCL about employer provided finance, and can we link our homes, indoor air quality and thermal comfort as part of the sort of working from home desk-based assessment to create another sort of pathway into retrofit for people that might not be picked up by the current grant schemes.
Amazing, that's great. And yes, I suppose that kind of idea of the horizons thinking around what we have now, just to a shout out, I suppose, to the Lara project as well, which is trying to look at some of those things that the MCS Foundation and a bunch of other people, ourselves included, in supporting. So there's definitely a good basis for like expanding that conversation and looking at it in the round. Thank you so much. That sounds really exciting actually as well. There's a lot going on here. Tara, over to you.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, so we also had some really great discussions. So I think first of all, so we were looking at the measuring of outcomes or impact evaluation. I think what was interesting at the start was actually expanding. So that originally we were kind of had, or I in my mind had been focused on the carbon impact, the carbon reduction of installing retrofit measures. But actually, what we first discussed was expanding what that actually could be. So could it be impact evaluation? So like resident perception of the measures that have been installed. So yes, that was, yeah, it's not just about carbon reduction. Also looking at kind of who would use the impact evaluation. So is it, obviously it's DESNAs, it's those administering grant funding programs. It could also be finance providers. So this is for, again, we tried to kind of think across tenures. So maybe they'll begin to look at that. So we also looked at if it, what kind of things would they also measure? Would it be environmental impact rating? They're currently looking at EPC. What else could there be? We also spoke quite a bit about the BS 40101. So I'm just going to put it in the chat in case, just to make sure everyone's familiar with that. So the BS 40101 for everyone is the Building Performance Evaluation and operation of building standards. So they're going through a kind of a refresh of it. And basically we spoke about this quite a bit, but we've kind of come to the conclusion that above all else, we need to propose a standard set of measured outcomes and one that goes across 10 years across grant funding programs. Ideally, that could be something that aligns with the BS standard. Not everyone will opt in for the BS standard, but at least if we are all looking at measured outcomes, they can still align. We can also start looking at whole life carbon, kind of really just expanding again the idea of what we will measure. Like I said, the emotional impact of retrofit, so looking at residents, that can start feeling into kind of, if we're looking at cost as well, it can start looking at kind of viability in terms of retrofit at scale. We can start building in that kind of thing. We also did speak quite a bit as well about the possibilities when you start measuring things. So, could you start, if you're measuring things within a community, does it open up other possibilities in terms of, there was one example for the Western power distribution where, if behaviours change, they wouldn't need to upgrade its local substation, which would then meant that the community were rewarded in a different way. And some investment went to community in a different sense. So when you start measuring, you start doing other things, you can start unlocking other things too. That was really interesting. And then we really honed in as well on one-stop shops. And that can be a really interesting platform for measuring or defining outcomes across different tenure groups.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we tried to keep bringing it back to the different types of residents. So anyone from my group, please jump in the chat if I've missed something fundamental there. But hopefully that's a fairly good. And we've filled in lots of things about who can help. But yeah, thanks everyone for a really great chat in the bigger room.
That's really amazing. And again, it's just really heartening to hear how expansive these conversations have become. And I think that's what we want to see. I think we all recognise that retrofit is a systems issue, not an individual technical problem issue. So having these things touched on in this session is just really, really heartening. I'll just be brief about planning policy, our group. We talked about a lot of things about local authority capacity for better guidance and having consistency across the departments within local authorities as well. The need for policy to be understood as something that can enable retrofit, not just be perceived as a blocker to it. So there's quite a lot in there about not just what is the policies that need to be in place, because actually sometimes the policies are in place, but the understanding and the interpretation of those policies. So guidance in reviewing that and taking away, there's a lot of fear factor when it comes to policy, both in terms of people who are applying for having projects but also fear from within under-resourced departments who are having to make decisions. And a couple of things that came out that would have been really useful is sort of having this common playbook for interpreting retrofit measures and how to interpret those. We're fortunate enough to have colleagues from Historic England with us, so we really and from several local authorities as well, so we really had a really wide-ranging discussion, lots about who can help, but actually great was there's lots about what's good and what's already happening in the space of policy, and there's a real keenness for this to be for the knowledge and the good work that's coming out in that policy space to be shared more widely. So there's a role for us to help with accelerating access to this good work that's already happening, and being a trusted source for signposting to that guidance, but also to be a convener to encourage the use of a common language playbook and such. So there's quite a lot in there, but I'm conscious of time. It again was just another really, really great opportunity, and actually we'll be participating in something about planning policy and retrofit tomorrow. So you'll hear more about that if you're following us on social media or in our newsletter, we can share about. So that was a lot. I'm exhausted. I don't know about all of you, but I think it was a really incredible session. Next steps, July the 8th. I think, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, are we 12 to 1 or 1 to 2? Sometime lunchtime, so 1 to 2. Thanks, Rachel. We're going to do a sort of a webinar version of this. What we will do is we will collate where we got to today, so that when we come into that webinar, it's much more about presenting what we've got, and probably with a bit of luck, we'll be announcing the names or the titles of the next task and finish groups, which will have come out of the workshops that you all participated in today. So there might be workshops around some of the things that we want to see the National Retrofit Hub play a role in delivering, but we will work through that as a group here. And thank you, Lauren. And yeah, so we will send out circulation, so you'll know everything that we've got through today and what's happening next. But suffice it to say, thank you so much for all of the engagement today. It's been really, really really invigorating and very, very rewarding, certainly for all of us who've been crunching over the numbers for the last while. So thanks very much, and unless there's anything I've missed, I think we can all go and have a lunch.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.